France, the Bay Area Brawler, Skylar Greenberg, and your Colonial Champion, Sean McCarty. Welcome to the Court Martial Podcast!
And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the Court Martial Podcast, the podcast made by wrestling fans for wrestling fans. I am your Colonial Champion, Sean McCarty, filling you in on Backlash 2024. I almost called it something that would probably end up getting me canceled, but I didn't say it. And Sigmund Freud will not win on this day. The person who will win is each and every one of you, the fans, because I have been going through some personal stuff lately, but I am heading towards the other side, and in order to occupy my brain space from something other than the goings-on of the day-to-day life of your Colonial Champion, I watched Backlash 2024, but I can't even call it that derogatorily because, man, this show was fun. And it is just me riding solo today because at the time that we were going to record this, and the recording of Josh Ageddon and the Bay Area Brawler Skylar Greenberg is up on the TAW Gaming channel. Link in the description to see what they thought of this. I couldn't record. I was going through some stuff. That's all I'm going to say. But that's all over now. We're in the past. Now we're heading back to the past to save the future from the past, which is really what it feels like with WWE. And that is not a bad thing. That is a good thing. And while DDP is angrily texting his lawyer to sue me for stealing his catchphrase, it is time to review the show. Now, as a whole, the Backlash was pretty good. You know, I think it's a really smart move to move into these markets that are, you know, territories that have not seen major shows sometimes ever. You know, they get some international shows, but they're not major shows that have impact on the goings-on of the day-to-day work of the professional wrestling business and of what WWE's doing. And the fact that of late they've been really trying to do that to pepper up some of these B pay-per-views where, you know, not a ton's going on. It's kind of a maintenance show, but there are still developments, but it's not like this is going to be the earth-shattering revelation in the whole storyline. That's not really what the show like this is about. But putting it in a crowd as rabid as the one in Lyon, France was a genius move because there was nothing this crowd could have done. There's nothing that this crowd could have done better to make this show feel like it was a big deal from top to bottom. Even though I was told, and you could hear it in the podcast, that Karrion Kross came out on SmackDown, and it's the only thing that this crowd did not like. And not even dislike as in boo, as in just gave no reaction for. Oh man, this poor guy. I feel so bad for him. But that wasn't a part of this show. That was a part of the SmackDown before this show, and justifiably so. We had 5 matches on the card. It only went about 3 hours, which was nice. You know, you kind of get in and out. Bob's your uncle, Betty's your aunt, and we keep going on. And we start out with the Bloodline, Solo Sikoa and Tama Tonga versus Kevin Owens and RKO, and instead he's not Haku, he's the Ha Kid because he's the son of Haku. And there was when I think it was Kevin Owens came out, and as the crowd was just losing their minds, but there was a sign right at the very beginning of the ramp from the crowd. One of them said, "Thank you, Hunter." And I immediately knew that dude's a plant. That's some of that good old-fashioned Paul Levesque ejaculation that we have come to a PLE, Paul Levesque ejaculation. That is the truth. That is the absolute truth. So every time you hear premium live event, you see PLE, just remember what it actually means. And so you get the thank you Hunter side, which is a plant. It was at this moment I knew that there was going to be a lot of crowd milking to be done on this night. And when you're in a crowd this rabid, how do you not? You know, how do you not do that? As Kevin Owens, he came out, and he just kind of stood there for a little while, I guess conveying a level of awestruck. And Orton comes out, and the whole crowd just sings his song throughout the whole thing. And you can tell they are like, to some degree, they didn't really know what to do. It was that loud and that crazy of a crowd. And it was and the fact that this was a 3-hour show, given the circumstances, that's pretty wild. I loved the set design. You know, it wasn't too much, but it was unique. And that's really what they need. They need unique, but not necessarily something that's so over the top, but not necessarily as so mundane as the stage that they used over and over and over and over for like a decade, to where it never felt like anything was anything different or special. This is different. As I'm grabbing for my water bottle, this is going to be you need adequate hydration. We are not sponsored by Prime, even though the show was. And it actually begged the question why they had, with Logan Paul not there and them not using a spot, they had a cart of Prime Energy out there, but nobody like used it. Why was it there? But let's not get into the semantics of that. But then out comes Solo Sikoa and Tama Tonga and Paul Heyman, he's just amazing. He's just actually amazing. And he's starting, to me, to maybe exceed Bobby Heenan just a little bit. I mean, as far as the longevity of his career is concerned, what he's able to convey, how he has become one of the most important figures in everything WWE, and has been for the better part of 20 years. And that's not even counting what he did in WCW or ECW or any of that legacy. He's been around for almost 50 years now. You know, I forget what it was, 1989 that he started doing the Dangerous Alliance. So yeah, 89 or 90, and here we are in 2024, and he is more valuable now than maybe he's ever has been. And he's really helping Solo and Tama Tonga feel like just the dynamic is perfect for what they're getting across. And there was a great shot when Solo and Tama were standing there, and then the red light came up behind Paul Heyman, and Paul Heyman was lit with red and this uncertainty, and it was so beautifully shot. And this is another thing I want to mention about this too. Lee Fitting, the man I affectionately called Dungarees for a little while, I got to give him credit, because given what this match ended up becoming, normally under the Dunn administration, I would have hated a match like this. But part of what makes these kinds of matches way more palatable is how you present them visually. And I think that Lee Fitting has done a great job of not only just changing up the dynamic of what you see in these matchups, but also how you get it shown to you. And it makes it so not only just refreshing, but also feel a lot more, I don't want to say professional, but it feels a lot more clean cut, but not in a way that feels sterile. You know, it's different. It's just different. And I really, really like the approach. And so then this whole thing happens. Their entrance is badass as all hell. And then they stand next in front of each other, and they're staring at each other, and the bell has rung, and Danny Angles is there. And as I'm looking at this, I go, please don't start with a hockey fight. Please don't start with a hockey fight. Please don't start with a hockey fight. God dang it, they started with a hockey fight. But that was pretty much where my complaints ended. Because they start brawling all over the place, and they're going crazy, and they, you know, and I'm expecting either a double count out, or they just didn't even like bother to start, and they're doing this pull part. And then now comes Nick Aldis and says, all right, you guys want to fight? Fine. You want to do this your way and just be the hell out of each other? Fine. This is a no DQ match. It's not my problem. You guys are getting hurt, but it's not on me. And I love that. I love that. And at least if you're going to do something like this, at least make sense with it. And that's what they're doing. They're adding justification. They're adding quality shots so that what you see out of this madness is still all-encompassing and looks nice. It, looks very good. There was one bad security guard, and that was the guy in the ponytail that did not know what the hell he was doing or where he was supposed to be. And as Owens does a couple stunners and all that, but so then we get into this big brawl, and what they do what they did at WrestleMania. They have the picture-in-picture where you're getting the split screen of what's going on in both side, areas of the matchup, which was pretty cool. Um, Owens used the prime sign, and I nailed him with that prime sign. And I like how Owens was just finding stuff around. Like, he found a lawn chair and just, like, hucked it at him. Like, it was whatever he could find Owens was doing. And this felt a lot more like an old school type of, not necessarily in the cringy Attitude Era style hardcore material, but this was a lot more, it's all people who know how to do it, and the way that to get it across where it doesn't seem like it's just phony garbage, the way that it is in everywhere else that you see it so ubiquitously in the wrestling industry anywhere other than WWE. And actually, this match would probably go over better in America and in the American market if we didn't get garbage like that done by way worse people that looks way worse, and they don't sell it and they just get up a second afterwards. This wasn't that. There was selling. There was a weird bring back heel doink sign, which I don't understand. I mean, does he not know? Does he not know that Matt Bourne is not alive anymore? I don't know. Anyway, but still, there's still confusion, you know, but the camera angles, there was a fun moment where Orton is getting, I think it was Orton, was getting beaten down, and all of a sudden Kevin Owens comes running in from the other side, and you see the camera angles, the one camera that had the split screen and then the one that was following Kevin, and they both kind of converge, and you get two separate shots of the same action taking place. And I thought that was a really, really cool shot. And that's the kind of thing, they're changing the way that you can see all this action so that it looks more interesting. It looks more ecstatic. It looks more crash test dummy, but in a way that still makes everybody look good and doesn't give you nausea at the camera cuts and trying to follow everything. And then, you know, when you try to follow everything, you miss everything. In this case, they know that they can do a split screen like that, and it makes you wonder why that was never even attempted before by Kevin Dunn. But I think we know the answer to that, because once you get comfortable, and you are allowed to get comfortable for as long as you want to get comfortable, then there's no reason to change anything or strive to be any better. And, you know, when you're guaranteed a job for life, why bother doing anything other than what you've always been doing? And that's the difficulty there. But in any case, then we start then they start heading back into the ring, and Kevin Owens hits a frog splash on, I believe it was Tama Tonga, and then Orton gets up onto the barricade like he's gonna do a frog splash, and he poses, and I, like Josh again, was like, he's not gonna do it. And sure enough, he wasn't going to do it. But the funniest part of that is he comes down, there was like a half a second of boo, the crowd kind of looked at each other as what they ought to do, and then they all golf clapped. It was the funniest thing. He just steps down, and then they just go. I'm like, okay, fair enough. Golf clap on the, I'm not attempting. Fair enough. And then we got we want tables. And they sure got tables. As Kevin Owens' shots with the furniture and the kendo sticks, they varied in strength, but then of course they got the cheapest pop in wrestling, because out came the tables. And there was a funny moment as they were setting up these tables, as Danny Angles left the ring and he's kind of running across, and the ring apron curtain had gotten kind of stuck in the ring apron, and Danny Angle's like real unassuming, like kind of trots over and just lifts it up and back into position. I was like, thanks, Danny. You gotta keep the aesthetic of the ring looking good. Yeah, it looked like the ring had a hair lip. And thankfully, Danny Angles, who was also in charge of cleaning up furniture after people got put through them. So I hope he got custodial pay on top of his traditional refereeing pay, because he had a night. Danny Angles had himself a night. And that's no knock or criticism. I love Danny Angles, the former Rudy Charles. And speaking of, just on a small side tangent, I was just watching the Black Saturday edition of Dark Side of the Ring, and I never knew that referee Nick Patrick's name was a work. His name's Joe Hamilton. I never knew that. So fun facts, you can't trust referee names all the time, even though I'm pretty sure a lot of them are now legitimate, at least in WWE, but I may not be right about that, so who knows. But sometimes you can't even trust the names, and that's the wrestling business we've come to know and love. And there was a point, as I believe it was after, I forget which part, it was before they put Solo through the table that was leaning up in the turnbuckle. He went to do one of those Samoan palm strikes to the chin where it really is just like you kind of caress your opponent's face like you're about to lean in and kiss them. And he had one of those moments where he literally, like, his middle finger and his index finger kind of lightly touched Randy Orton's face, or Kevin Owens' face rather, and that was about as much as it was. Maybe he saw like a bug in Kevin Owens' beard. I don't know. I'm not a doctor. But in any case, then Tama Tonga came back, and when Tama Tonga came back, then they gave this whole litany of credentials of Tama Tonga from New Japan and the IWGP 7-time champion, and they did a whole bunch of New Japan shoutouts, which is an absurd thing to hear in 2024 WWE, and it really just goes to show the times have changed. Even though there was not necessarily, it wasn't necessarily the best pronounced on Michael Cole's part. We'll just put it that way. But still, the symbolism of that is pretty wild. And then at that moment, I caught a glimpse of Paul Heyman, and Paul Heyman looked sick to his absolute stomach because he's in control, but you could tell he has no control, and that's something that's really starting to bother him. And then there was a really nice moment in about 6 or 7 minutes to go on this, where Michael Cole said, "And folks, if you're just joining us, we're here in the opening matchup between Randy Orton and Kevin Owens versus the Bloodline." It's a refreshing thing to hear from an announcer going, "Well, it's also possible some of you have tuned in a little late. Welcome you, each and every one of you." You know, that kind of stuff that used to be so synonymous with broadcasting that Vince just never had the announcers do or say. Ever. Like, ever. And it's one of those wild things that you don't even think about until, the dynamic changes. But good on Michael Cole for that. Then Tama Tonga got a insane clothesline. And right after that, we got a big Orton special, which is, his usual sequence of whatnot. And what I thought they were saying at the beginning, and I think it changed because they said it was only 2 or whatever, but at first it sounded like, sacre bleu, and then it turned into something else different entirely, and then I stopped trying to follow what the fans were doing. But they were white hot throughout this whole thing. Everything got a reaction. They were going absolutely bonkers. And this is, then we get to this one moment, and this is maybe the only part of the match I didn't really care for. Kevin Owens sets up like 6 chairs vertically and I say vertically, like if you're on the top turnbuckle and you're looking down into the ring, they're lined up in like a straight line for you. 6 chairs, they've done this kind of setup before. But I thought about it going, if Kevin Owens was going to put him through that, like, what move would he be attempting? Because it didn't really make any sense, given where Tama Tonga's positioning was, unless Tama Tonga deliberately did something different, right? It at initial point, the way that Kevin Owens set up to do it, it didn't make sense what move he was aiming for initially before Tama Tonga inevitably got the advantage and put it into position where he was going to do the suplex, and instead Kevin Owens got his Fisherman Buster, which looks great, and truth be told, that was very skillfully executed by Kevin Owens. So I'm not taking him away from that. I'm just saying the spot in general doesn't really make much sense because it doesn't make sense initially what Kevin Owens was intending, because it just where Tama Tonga was, that inherently was going to need repositioning of some description no matter what they did. But that's also just me being a big nitpicker at this moment. But then we get to the finish here where it looks like it's going to be, Orton's got the RKO, looks like it's going to be over. 1, 2, and Danny, you didn't see this on TV, but Danny Angles gave himself a little push because Tonga Loa got there a little bit too late. But here comes Tonga Loa, and everyone's shocked to see him. Paul's shocked to see him. And then that is enough to kind of alter the outcome a little bit. And then, sure enough, we get Tama Tonga, and then finally the Samoan Spike from Solo Sikoa, who gets the 1, 2, 3. It was fun chaos. It was shot beautifully, and it had the right outcome, I think. I think the fact that they're waiting on Jacob Fatu is smart. I think if they've got Tongaloa there to add to this new bloodline, that's smart. And I think it's gonna be really, really fun to watch what this new assembly of the bloodline is up to, and the fact that Paul Heyman is kind of being dragged along for the ride this is very intriguing. Developments have happened here. We have to just see where it goes. But I was a big fan of this match. I thought they did a really good job, and I had very little to actually be upset about with this one. And so that took care of match number 1. Match number 2 is Bayley versus Naomi versus Tiffany Stratton. And this is for the WWE Women's Championship. And it's not the WWE Women's World Heavyweight Championship, but the Women's Championship. Bayley and Naomi and Tiffany Stratton. And I won't lie to you, kids. I wanted to get into this match. I wanted to. Naomi got quite a reaction. Tiffany Stratton got quite a reaction. Bayley got quite a reaction once the entrance theme itself stopped. And that brings me to my first point. Bayley's entrance theme sucks. It sucks. And if this is a Def Rebel invention, I am starting to understand why people are saying what they're saying, because it doesn't lend itself at all to any interaction between Bayley and the fans. And that's a big part of what entrance themes have to do. I think about the way that people sing Cody's theme or Randy's theme, and there has to be some level of interaction you can have with the fans through your theme song. And I think a lot of these ones don't connect to the fans in that way. I thought very much the same about AJ's when he came out. And how much I would have loved to just hear some sort of remix of Get Ready to Fly. And how cool that would have been for this moment. Or if he could figure out a way to get some sort of cockamamie, I don't know, some level of cover of the Bullet Club theme, but, because they were going to mention 2 Bullet Club leaders later, with this whole situation. But I'm getting ahead of myself here. The point is, this theme for Bayley sucks. But I will say there's something that made this way better. So Sam Irvin comes in, didn't have a problem with her tonight. And I'll tell you why I didn't have a problem with her tonight. A, because there's sometimes when she goes completely crazy over the top. Didn't really feel like that this time. I mean, she was definitely her sprightly self, who was very, happy to be there and do the announcing. But this was not I'm trying to clench my voice deeper to make it sound more menacing. This was a lot more free, I guess. She's a lot more free to kind of be her in a way that I think that she wasn't before. Maybe that's just the jet lag. I don't know, but I was not nearly as upset with Sam Urban. But I gotta give Lee Fitting credit again. They do the in-ring intros, which I used to hate from the WWE. And again, it's how these things are shot. They bring out and they start out with Naomi, and they say Naomi, and then boom, right at the bottom, they have the deco at the bottom of the screen in this really nice, like, steel color, Challenger, Naomi, and they give her the deco right there with that close-up camera, which looks like a phantom cam, the way that the actual pixels looked in that, but I don't know that for sure, excuse me. Then they do the same thing, and they did that all night with the in-ring intros, and I thought that was a great ad. It was a great addition to that, and that makes it feel more legitimate. That's what matters. And that's about where I stopped caring, because okay, with the exception of a couple instances, which end up being anomalies because of the people involved and the way that they put together the matches, I'm not typically a big triple threat guy, as far as the standard WWE style of triple threat is concerned. And mainly because it looks like most of the time that it's 3 people doing coordinated spots. You go, and then you go, and then I go, and then you go, and then I go, and then you hit me, and I hit you, and you hit her, and then we both hit there, and then she hits both of us, and we all go down, and the crowd goes, yay, yay, or, like seals, and then everyone's all giddy and happy because it's just a bunch of sequence maneuvers. That doesn't really appeal to me. Now, in certain circumstances, they can make it work. like what happened with Logan Paul and Orton and Kevin Owens at WrestleMania this year. That was a really good triple threat match. Same thing with the Gunther, Drew, and Sheamus match the year before. They can do it. There are potentials for it, but it's not necessarily the rule. That it's more the exception that makes these matches good. You know, it's going to be more often than not, you're going to get a whole series of moves. And this is basically how this match started. It started with Tiffany Stratton charges in, Bayley comes around, gets her with an arm drag, and then Naomi hits an arm drag, and then they do another arm drag, and then there's a roll-up, and then there's another roll-up, and it's kind of really sloppy. And then Bayley rolls up Naomi, and Naomi rolls up Tiffany Stratton. And I said, all right. No. If this is where we're going with this, this is not going to be the style of triple threat that I want to watch. Now, I know people really like those triple threat matches, so I'm not, if you liked it, God bless you. I'm glad you liked it. I'm glad it was fun, and they had a lot of moves, and they did a bunch of covers, and that's wonderful. I come back, so I said I'm skipping to the finish. So I skip a good amount, and I come back right as Tiffany Stratton is hitting some pretty lackluster Alabama slams onto Naomi and Bayley onto the announce tables. And she comes back into the ring, and almost immediately, those two get back up, and they're back in the ring, and she's going to go for the PME. And instead, it is countered to a 3D, which I was like, okay, I guess. I mean, I know Naomi is banging Jimmy, but like, okay, weird move to throw into that. And then just like that, she gets hit with the 3D, and Naomi and Bayley do a couple of roll-up counters, and one of them wins it. And Bayley wins. And now here's the thing. A couple points to this. The first one is, what would it have done for Tiffany Stratton if she had been in this match one-on-one and gotten so close, but couldn't quite get there, and Bayley had almost gotten her, and Tiffany Stratton either gets herself disqualified or something. There's some sort of screwy finish, that's some non-finish. Because you can have non-finishes on major shows, especially on a B show like this. You know, it'll get heat. It used to get heat all the time, except that Vince did it so frequently where there'd be shows where you'd have 3 DQs on one pay-per-view. They're terrible stuff. You know, just garbage booking. You know, it's not like that anymore. So I would have preferred a one-on-one match between Bayley and Tiffany Stratton with a non-finish where you can continue to make that feud personal so that you can build to a more money-drawing match down the line at like SummerSlam between the two of them. That's what I would have done, personally. The problem I have with this match, or what the 2 seconds I saw of it, is Naomi was there primarily to eat the pin because they don't want to pin Tiffany Stratton. Again, non-finish would have worked. DQ or countout could have worked, depending on how you did it. I trust this booking committee enough to make a decent finish out of one of those notions. But instead, Naomi got caught in a roll-up, so it didn't look like she got completely beat. So she looks okay in this, even though she got pinned, and then was like, you got me. We're friends, so you got me, and celebrated with Bayley, and that was just strange. Tiffany didn't even get any heat back on her, and she wasn't involved in the equation, which I don't mind. And Bayley retained, but if the overall point was for Bayley to retain, then why not have this be a match where Tiffany Stratton can take her to the limit, realizes she can't win or can't pin Bayley, and then goes to cheat and gets caught and gets disqualified for it. And gets maybe a little heat on her afterwards, and then there's a little bit more to it, and then it can get personal in one way or another. You know, it's just, to me, there could have been so much more potential in the one-on-one capacity of what Tiffany Stratton and Bayley was, and you could have the first match of that here, and have a bigger and better match between the two of them down the line. So it's not like you're blowing a wad of having a money match now, because there's more money to be made in that match later, but it's not hurting you by having this match now, especially in front of a crowd like this, you know, where you could have really gotten some decent heat with a crowd that was ready to react. You could have gotten more, I think, out of a singles match here, especially because Naomi really wasn't needed in this at all. She wasn't necessary to the whole overall point and scheme of what was trying to get across. Except we need Bayley to have a title defense, and this is the best way we could book this triple threat to make it make any sense. And You know, and that's just for my sensibilities as opposed to maybe some other people's sensibilities. Triple H seems to really like triple threat matches. He books them a lot. He books them a lot. And, you know, that's fine. And you can get, again, you can find some that are pretty good. But this was not for me, and I was not going to be really that enthusiastic into it. But again, I'm cool with the finish because the finish protected everybody involved and invested in what this was. So I'm not knocking what the finish was. The finish was fine. It's just the concept of why this ended up a triple threat is you could have gotten more out of less, I guess would be the final statement I would say about this. But in any case, then we move on to our World Heavyweight title match. But before we do, we get the bloodline. Jey Uso is in the back getting ready for his matchup, and we see Tama Tonga and Tonga Loa and Solo Sikoa pass by Jey, all with their scowly Samoan looks on their faces. And they all pass in front of him. And then Paul Heyman, whose eyes screamed, "Blink once if you need help." As he looked at Jey Uso going, please help me. And I don't know whether fast food has anything to do with it or not, but I know that Paul Heyman is the big thing I note about this is that Paul Heyman is very symbolic sometimes with his gestures. Because not only did he look at Jey Uso like he was being held captive, and I wonder if Paul puts the lotion in the basket. But instead of walking in front of Jey Uso, he walked behind Jey Uso. Which makes me think that symbolically speaking, Paul Heyman's going like, hey, I don't know what's going on here, but I still have your back if you really need it. And that, it's just another little intriguing bit. And Triple H is really good with throwing that little subtle Easter egg kind of stuff into the equation. I think there is going to be more to that. So it's funny that they're teasing a lot here. And I think that's what most of this show was about. Is this show was really the tease, spelled T-E-A-S-E, as to what's to come, but also the tease as in T-E-E-S, as in they're setting up the golf ball to take their big swing down the line. So they're really teeing up some really good stuff here in what they've got going on. And this matchup, Jey Uso versus Damian Priest for the World Heavyweight title. Match was good. The match was mostly Damian Priest being good, and Jey Uso is there. But man, you cannot deny that Jey Uso is over like hell. I mean, to see all of those cell phones bobbing up and down, you know, at first I was like, what's the big deal with this entrance? Because everything was overhyped. I was like, what's the big deal about it? But then you start seeing just hundreds of phones just bobbing up and down for a long time. I'm like, well, say what you want. He's over. And I'm not a big fan of his work. I mean, we saw that and we kind of discussed that at length at the WrestleMania 40 Night 1 show. But it was pretty wild to see just how much people are really gravitating towards Jey Uso. And as a personality, he's main event level. As a worker, but you know, at this point, if you've got someone that over and you don't use him just because he's not the greatest worker in the world, then you're not really doing good business. So I don't knock them for having this kind of match. Damian Priest came in and I thought his theme, which I think also was made by Def Rebel, kind of sucks too. I would have rather have him come out to the original Judgment Day theme, or they make one that was better. But there was one little moment here where I don't think it was intentional that they did this. That they do the long shot of Damian Priest as he's down the ramp. You know, he's just walked out and it's so out of focus. And it took a minute for the cameraman to slowly just rotate that dial so that Damian Priest came into focus. And if it was intentional, then it was just a weird choice. You know, that was some CIW Satan kind of stuff. But you know, again, I wouldn't be surprised if Lee Fitting is a CIW fan, especially how match 1 went. And anyway, the pacing of this was really good. The way Jey can control the crowd is really impressive. You know, the fact that he could just wave his hands down and go, yeet, And then he waves the other hands down and goes, yeet. And then the halves of the crowd did it. And, you know, say what you want. It was a lot of milk in, or as Jim Cornette would say, a lot of hot dogging. And it's really kind of the backbone of the Samoans in general is a lot of that. But I think at some point it's going to wear out its welcome with Jey Uso, because I think the work of his matches is going to catch up with him eventually. And that's not, and again, he can control the crowd, and I'm not saying he doesn't have great crowd presence. By the way, El Campeon, the way that they call Damian Priest, is way, way better than Le Champion, who drank a little too much of the bubbly. He drank a lot bit of the bubbly, and then turned into a gigantic bubble. Oh my God, Chris Jericho is the dirty bubble. That's the gimmick he should be using. Fuck the learning tree. The dirty one. That's what Chris Jericho should be. Editor, put Chris Jericho's face on the dirty bubble.
The dark deed you requested is done, sir.
Yeah, take the dirty bubble challenge. That was like the 5 labors of Jericho was the dirty bubble challenge. See, it all fits. It all fits in. Nick Gage was there. There was pizza. Oh, yeah. Good stuff. Well, not good stuff. He's the dirty bubble. And did he mention anything about eating dirt? And the point is, anyway, they start getting into this thing, and it was okay. I mean, Damian Priest knows what he's doing. I think the difficulty with Damian Priest is that because of the manner in which he held that briefcase for so long and just pussyfooted around and waited until there were a lot more stars in the equation, carving out a niche for him is kind of difficult at this stage. But I think WWE knows that and are leaning into that a little bit. Because the match started out fine. You know, Jey Uso goes to jump on Damian Priest, you know, because Priest goes to take a powder. And Jey walks up and he does a big splash from the apron, and he gets caught. And Damian Priest, I thought Damian Priest was going to, like, hit his back into the ring post, but instead walks all the way to the other end of the ring to hit him in the barricade kind of softly. And to me, I was like, that's kind of a far distance to be running to make that look good. But he made up for it because Jey Uso hits a couple kicks, and then Damian Priest lands one punch and knocks Jey Uso straight down, and it looked beautiful. And he is becoming a better striker, although I really wish, in general, we saw a lot less forearms. We need a lot fewer forearms and more proper punches. The problem is, who's really good at throwing proper punches? And, you know, crap punches can really ruin somebody's aesthetic. And so I understand that, but man, I'd like to see more punches, because the people who throw punches and throw good punches, you always remember it. You know, Drew McIntyre, Randy Orton, LA Knight, Roman Reigns, The Undertaker, obviously, even though Michael Cole's insufferable reiteration of he's the best pure striker. Every time you saw him, you would hear him say it every match. And it was, whether it was right or not, it was brutal. But the pacing of this was really good. They ended up having a good back and forth. They're still leaving room to breathe. But they're not milking too much either, but they're giving it just enough to where the crowd has some space to react and kind of expand and to hear what's going on. And then we get to these spears. Damian Priest hits a spear on Jey Uso, and it was at this moment that I said, you know, the only person who should be doing a spear in WWE right now is Roman Reigns. No one else. Jey Uso, stop. Please stop. It looks worse than Christians and Big Show's combined. And that is saying something. And it's just, it just doesn't do anything for me. If it's not coming from Roman Reigns, so I didn't really even love him doing it for a while, but if it's not coming from Roman Reigns, I don't want to see it. And we got a couple of them in here, and then JD McDonough shows up and kind of messes up Jey, and then Damian Priest, you know, he gets the advantage, but he sees Jey Uso, and at that moment, Michael Cole called JD McDonough he was a the Klingon head of JD McDonough, and I thought that was incredibly funny because that's a very and I love that like 3/4 of this man's whole gimmick now is I have a weird shaped head. That's JD McDonough. That's his whole thing. Is just I have an odd cranium, is his gimmick, and it's honestly great because it honestly makes Finn Balor look better, it makes Yabu look better. But anyway, so they doing this, and then they get the I forget what it was that they did that made me write this down, but Jey Uso got hit again, and he got laid out, and it recurred to me that Jey Uso does not sell pain facially very well. You know, he's good at getting the crowd reaction, get them to look, but he's not really good at like facials of selling pain. As the way I noticed it the most was when he got hit with the, you know, towards the end of the match, as Damian Priest hit the ring ropes and roped and got Jey Uso in the crotch, or at least it looked like it did, and he just kind of leaned over and you couldn't even see his face, where that would have been the moment to have the eyes bulge like quarters and go, oh, you know, register that. You know, register, I just got hit in the balls trying to do this thing, you know, and that also, when you sell it like that, you're also really helping the idea of that's a really dirty thing to do because you were hitting the balls. That's a low blow. Not an intention, you know, not one that would cause a disqualification, but it helps the idea of what the spot is supposed to accomplish. And I think that Jey sometimes gets a little too caught up in just doing the super kicks and the hand slaps and all of that, that he loses sight because he's got so much charisma to get the crowd into it. He loses it on the other end of when it gets into this kind of technical stuff. I really don't think facially he tells a very good story in a wrestling match. But he's great in the bloodline drama style and his entrance and all of that. I mean, not many people can do that. You know, and I hate to say this because I just saw the Dark Side of the Ring episode, but it's kind of true. Jey Uso is kind of like the Sandman right now, where 95% of what makes him great is the entrance, where it gets him to that big move and he's got all the crowd and they're all doing the hand wave. It's like what Sandman would do. He'd come out there, they'd all scream at him, he'd drink the beer and smash the can on his head, and everybody'd lose their minds. And then he'd get in the ring and wrestle, and oh Lord, my God, it's painful. And this was not painful, but because it was a good match, it was still a good match. It's just, it started going a little long, which is not a surprise. And then I did like the clothesline counter to the South of Heaven to the false finish that got maybe the best false finish pop of the night. That was great. And that was before Jey got crotched and instead of selling that. But then we get the finish where Jey gets the splash, cover 1-2, and JD McDonough gets the foot on the ropes for Damian Priest. And the referee sees it and asks JD, did you do that? He goes, I don't do that. I just have a big head, remember? And turns around, and that's enough, you know, for Balor to kind of get involved. Jey Uso takes care of Balor, but that's enough for Damian Priest to get an advantage. Finally hit another one, 1, 2, 3, and that was it. And the thing is that I like this finish, and I'll explain. I don't love that the Razor's Edge gets kicked out of, I will say, though. I really like that being a finish because it just looks so devastating, especially from Damian Priest. Like, he looks like he was born to use that thing. But, you know, the choke slam's fine, too. I'm not saying it's not. It's just different. You know, it's like AJ using the phenomenal forearm instead of the Styles Clash most of the time, you know, or something, you know, like that. It's like, it's fine, it's just different. But this is why I like this finish. Damian Priest still gets a win. He's upset at the fact that the Judgment Day want to keep fighting Jey Uso, and he pushes him off and kind of fends up and snatches Finn Balor by the jaw as he's saying, like, it's over, we're done, you know, we're finished here. And I know that they probably had more to do with Rhea and Dom when they were here, but because they both got taken out, they're now in this position of, like, we don't really know what to do with JD or Finn or Damian Priest in this position, but Damian needs to shine without the Judgment Day, so they're doing this rift, and it's like, now, here, you stand over there, and let's pose. But what I like about this finish is that it gives it gives both sides a valid argument. Because on one hand, Damian Priest said, I told you not to get involved. I said, don't get involved, and you still got involved. Why? And then you're going up and you're beating this dude like he's done. It's over. I took care of it. Like, let's get the hell out of here and celebrate the way we need to celebrate. So Damian Priest is trying to do it the right way because he's now the champion and feels the responsibility of being that champion. But on the other end, you could also make the case for Balor and JD going, well, yeah, but the only reason you won the belt was that you cashed in your money in the bank because of someone else's help. And then in your first title defense, you wouldn't have won it unless we helped you. Even though you told us not to come out, you have us to thank, so you still have that belt and it's not around Jey Uso's waist. So this gives both sides a compelling case against each other, and I'm interested. I'm interested in where they're going to take this, and the direction that they want to take this, and how they do it. And that's really the whole goal of the night. This was a bunch of teases. This tees up what they're aiming to do down the line, and I'm okay with that. I'm totally cool with that. And what would be really fascinating is if they have Finn Balor win Money in the Bank, and then that becomes kind of a situation. And I'm not saying he's gonna, but I'm saying that this is a point where you could do something like that and make Finn Balor more interesting and involved at a higher level again if you really want to. And it's going to be challenging given the landscape of who else is on this show. But you've got flexibility here, and I think that that's something that was very sorely lacking with WWE for so long. So that, yeah, it would have been nice to see where they were going to take Judgment Day if Rhea hadn't got injured and Dom hadn't got injured. But at the same time, you're still finding ways to make this work to keep these guys interesting so it doesn't feel... And I guess in that way as well, like, this also makes it feel like Damian Priest doesn't deserve to be at that high level with everybody else, which I think they're leaning into a little bit. And I'm okay with that, like, because I think they recognize what Damian Priest winning the belt when he won it meant, and how it was done and the way they won, and how people were going to view him in comparison to all of these big name stars who have this big name feels. And that's the way that it goes in wrestling sometimes. But I like the way that they're working on this, and I like the way that they're keeping it interesting for everyone involved. So a good piece of business, definitely moves things along. I'm glad Jay didn't win it. And we'll just have to see what goes on from here. But that's really the bottom line of that. Then we get to match 4. The Kabuki Warriors versus Jade Cargill and Bianca Belair. And now I gotta say this, because Skylar asked in the podcast that they did on TAW Gaming. Skylar asked and said, and made a point to say that I said at WrestleMania, and I did believe this at the time, that I didn't want Jade Cargill and Bianca Belair as a tag team because why are you trying to do the Spider-Man meme, and make one look lesser than the other? That being said, that was before I got a chance to look at them as a tag team. With the way they're matching outfits and the way those two look together, I'm doing a complete 180. I will openly admit I was very, very wrong. This is money. Jade Cargill and Bianca Belair is money as a tag team. And I will say this as well. I'm going to go one step further and say that Bianca Belair and Jade Cargill could get this women's tag team to a point. If they could find other tag teams that have any sort of look or some sort of resemblance to this, they could make this tag team belt actually money drawing capable. Because these two looked so good together. And they, because they do have a lot of the, similar kind of backgrounds and I don't want to say they have similar movesets, but there is a very similar style about them. But I thought that was going to be jarring, and it ends up being very complimentary. As the Kabuki Warriors, Dakota Kai makes no sense in this faction anymore. I know she's there because, she did the betrayal on Bayley too, but, now there's really no sense to that at all. But in any case, Bianca Belair, she didn't get the reception I thought she was gonna, but I think that that's also because her baby facing, I think, is a lot more catered to the American crowd. But, they were still excited for it. And then here comes Jade, and Jade, she looks incredible. This is one of the few Def Rebel songs that I think they did a really good job with. And they went in there and they did the double pose, and I'm like, oh, god damn. You know, this is like, I don't want to say these two are like the female road warriors, but in the capacity of what they're capable of doing, if they really, this is more like, this is, I don't want to say, let's see, what's a good comparison here? But, oh my god. I don't want to necessarily say that Bianca is Mr. Wrestling 2, but in a lot of ways, this is kind of like 2 in TA. Because you've got somebody who's really charismatic, who's got a lot of powerhouse and learning, maybe more like Luger and like Barry Windham. You know, somebody who can really work and has really developed and come a long way, being able to help somebody who has got loads of charisma and loads of potential and an incredible physique, who's just green right now. But them together, I mean, they do power moves, and if they made faster comebacks and just started mowing over opponents, this could be the female road warriors that could draw you some money. Because this is an attraction. Those two are an attraction I would go to see. That's how good they look. That being said, this match was all right. It was very well built for the most part from start to finish. But there was just, the Kabuki Warriors did a lot of stuff that I didn't really care for. I thought that they really kind of screwed this match over. Especially because of how good Jade and Bianca looked throughout most of this. We got to see the Octopus. There was a double backbreaker that I believe Jade did that looked really good. I will say that when there was getting some heat on Bianca, you know, when they started doing that. And I think that the Kabuki Warriors do a good job of getting heat, you know, when they finally do take advantage. They've always been pretty good at that. But then Bianca gets something to get for the hot tag, and Asuka tags in Kairi Sane, and Kairi Sane gets in her, and she kind of walks a little bit, and Bianca Belair is basically right at Jade Cargill, and Kairi realizes, oh shit, yeah, I gotta break this up, and takes way too long to break up the hot tag. So it really looked jarring, like there was plenty of time for Bianca to actually get there, and it looked like it should have been, but she ends up shutting it down, and they keep going. But then we do finally get the hot tag, but before we do, there was the armbar that was more like a disarm her that Asuka was doing, that they put into, you know, if Bianca was going to get a KOD, and this was really smart. I liked this. Asuka put her hands on the top turnbuckle, and Kairi Sane tagged the hand, not on the turnbuckle, on the ropes. And Kairi Sane tagged the hand of Asuka for a hand tag. That wasn't the only one. There was a lot of back slaps on this night. But then things get a little hairy. Jade Cargill comes in, does a great springboard crossbody that looked amazing onto both women. She's doing her comeback. Boom, boom, boom. She looks great. And then, you know, Bianca gets indisposed. She's selling on the outside. And then Asuka gets tagged in from Kairi Sane, and they do this series of punches and kicks like to the front and the back of her, and she gets ping-ponged back a little bit. Kairi Sane hits her with, I don't remember what at this point, and it's probably a big kick and knocks her down, and Kairi goes for the cover, but Asuka was the one who was tagged in. And both of the Kabuki Warriors had forgotten this, because Asuka's nowhere to be found. Kairi Sane goes for the cover, and Danny Angles is like, no, you're not legal. And it's not his fault, because this is what happened. And if you go back and watch the tape, folks, Kairi Sane went and tagged Asuka. Asuka comes in, stays at the edge of the turnbuckle, you know, right there, right at the edge of the ropes. They do their moves, and then Asuka just dips, and Kairi Sane keeps going with Jade. So either that was what was drawn up, and something happened where the match structure was like, oh shit, we didn't think about this, or Asuka was supposed to be in, and neither of the women remembered. And then because they got lost, Jade got lost, and then Jade didn't know what the hell to do. So she locks on like a headlock, and then she goes to do some sort of slam that she just kind of made up on the spot. And she's trying to figure stuff out. Meanwhile, in the camera angle that you see as Jade is getting this together, you see Bianca Belair kind of pull herself up to where her face and chin are right at the edge of the apron as Danny Angles runs over and slides over to Bianca, as does Asuka, to run over there to pretend like she's grabbing the hair. Meanwhile, and I should add this too, as Jade's got this headlock on Asuka, I think it is, in order for Kairi to get back into the ring, Kairi tags Asuka and tags her on the top of the head. It was a head slap tag as she comes in to do this botched stuff with Jade that inevitably, I don't even remember what Kairi tried to hit and then rolled Jade into a cover, and then Danny didn't know what to do. And so Bianca had to reread all the instructions as Asuka ran over to hear what had to be done, and Danny ran over to hear what had to be done. And this just completely combusted. And it wasn't Jade's fault either. I mean, what are you supposed to do? She got a headlock. At least she put on a hold instead of standing there shuffling like The Miz did when Shane McMahon tore his quad half a second into their drop-down leapfrog. And, this was much different, but, they finally got it back together, and they did the double arm bar so they could do the gotch lift and slam, and they got their big moves, and they did the KOD and the Stormbreaker or whatever she called, or whatever her thing is called, Jaded. It's called Jaded, not the Stormbreaker. That's the other guy in the other place. But anyway, she gets the Jaded 1, 2, 3, the new tag team champions. They got it back together. And so, I'm not going to fault them for that. I mean, it's a young team. I'm sure the Road Warriors' first matches didn't look the prettiest either. So I think that this team has got potential to make these tag team championships mean more than they have ever meant since they started. That's how good this team is going to be. Jade Cargill needs that experience factor from somebody, very much so in the way that TA did in 83 to 84, because Jade's going to be a star, period. She is going to be a money-drawing talent. Main event a pay-per-view one day or two or another. That's very possible. That is incredibly possible. But she's not going to be able to do that now because she doesn't have she's too green. But Bianca Belair has been in that position, has really come into her own as a worker, is able to guide Jade along. They look great together. They had the matching outfits. And if the women could come up with some more respectable tag teams, you could have a women's tag team division and make it work and have it draw something, because these two are the champions. And Bianca needed this too. And that's another part of this. Bianca as a singles wrestler had run its course, and the people were starting to sour on it. Not necessarily her herself, but just the redundancy. And that has changed. And that's something that, in that respect, this gives me a lot of hope. The match collapsed. It happens. Shit happens. Am I going to fault any of the women for it? Maybe the Kabuki Warriors, because they're the ones who kind of made the whole thing fugazi. When they both forgot who was the legal person. And you can't blame Danny Angles, because rule number one of officiating, especially in the Triple H administration, is call it like it's an actual match. Call it like a shoot. And Kairi wasn't legal. And it's not his fault that she got confused, because she wasn't the legal person. But there's a future here for this tag team championships. And that is something I never thought I'd be able to say. So I liked this match. It had its moments. It was a peaks and valleys kind of match. But I think that they've got something here with Jade and Bianca. They've got something big here with Jade and Bianca. And I'm really looking forward to see where it goes. And then we get our main event. AJ Styles and Cody Rhodes for the WWE Undisputed Heavyweight Championship. The match itself was incredibly good. Long, but good. It's two guys who are great at what they do, telling a simple story. AJ getting some subtle heat, and it was back and forth. It was a great match, competitively, back and forth. Here's the thing, though. It was weird, first of all, hearing Corey mention AJ versus Dusty to begin with, but that also, I think, kind of helped into the aesthetic of the match. They mentioned former two Bullet Club leaders in that respect, albeit at different times. They really did bring a lot of history into this to build it. And even though everybody knew AJ was not walking out of this match with the win, everybody could still be along for the ride, and this was a pure, clean match with a clean finish, with one finisher being the only thing that did it on the night, which is another big plus for me. You know, all it takes is one finish, and it was one Crossroads that did it, and I really enjoyed this, and I don't have a ton to say about it other than just go watch it, because they just did an incredible back and forth. They told a good story. The pacing was really well. My biggest problem with this was the Lyon, France fans started getting real irritating. The phenomenal AJ Styles and the phenomenal chant that they did that forced the hard cam to basically rock like a magnitude 7 earthquake. That was really cool at first, but then it got to the point where they were doing it so frequently, anytime AJ got the advantage, that he couldn't get any heat. And it got to the point where the fans were so almost more enamored with themselves than they were the matchup. So then, as a result, I mean, then they were still involved, but they kind of got more. They got more into their own deal than they did what what was going on inside. Because AJ had an amazing Oshi Goroshi halfway through this that got no reaction because they were in the middle of a chant themselves that had no resemblance to or context to what was happening at that moment. And that's my big problem with British crowds a lot of the times, is that they kind of get too preoccupied with themselves, that they kind of you lose a little bit of what's happening in the middle. It doesn't happen all the time, but you know, they mentioned that Jessica Carr is the first woman to referee a WWE title match, which is all well and good, but man, I can't wait to see the heel that finally does a ref bump on a female referee, because it's gonna get heat. And it's heat that is not going to be that damaging, honestly. First of all, have you seen Jessica Carr? If you look at Jessica Carr's Instagram, she is in incredible shape. So I'm sure she could take the bump and not have any issues with it. Truthfully. And that's as an endorsement of Jessica Carr and who she is. I really like her as a referee. I'm sure if she got a ref bump, she could handle it. And also, man, that's going to get some... It's just a great heat tool. But they never do it with female referees, and I feel like there's going to be a point where it happens. And I can't wait to see when it gets done and who's involved with it. But it didn't happen on this occasion. Cody did a Stardust reference because AJ did a Stardust reference, but I think owning it and owning up to it by Cody Rhodes is a great little piece of storytelling. I really loved when AJ Styles was kind of slapping Cody around, and then finally Cody slapped AJ and goes, "Is that what you want? You want me to play dirty, huh?" And, you know, that even the babyface, you know, all right, now he's fired up and he's into this. And it was great. You know, they did a good job. They did a good job with all of it. Cody starts selling his back and AJ sets him up and hits him with an electric chair. You know, we got an apron brain buster. And this is the thing. This was great. It was all great. And again, I don't really have much to say about it because they just went, it was back and forth. AJ got really good heat. They targeted body parts. At one point, AJ did a 450 that got a false finish. And then there was this point where AJ Styles hits Cody with a burning hammer, which was ridiculous. And then Cody kicks out at 1 and starts hulking up. And I don't mind the hulking up because that actually got a reaction. Cody hulking up got a reaction. The problem was they went another 10 minutes after this point. And also, for as infrequently as we see the burning hammer, couldn't AJ have hit like a Styles clash and then him kick out at 1? You know, if you're gonna blow through something, have it be a finish of some description. Have him kick out at 1 of the 450 instead. Because the 450, when was the last time that beat somebody? At least that you could get some riling and he took the advantage, and then you can really get into this. But there was no leg to be dropped on this night, but if you're going to hulk up, don't go another 10 minutes. Go another 3 minutes. You know, have some shoot down and come down, but then you finally get to the end and point of it. And Cody had a Kimura lock on. And they didn't mention Brock Lesnar, but they alluded to Brock Lesnar, which makes you wonder, you know, whether that's a tease that we're going to end up seeing him again down the line, which I wouldn't be that surprised. But then Cody hits one Crossroads finally, and the one Crossroads is what does it. It was great. it was long, and the crowd got really irritating because you kind of lost a lot of the, to me, you lost a lot of the dynamic of a heel and a babyface, but at the same time, that wasn't necessarily what this was about either. You know, and it came to be, it was a great match. It was a great match. I don't know if I necessarily call it like a match of the year candidate match, but it was a great match. And it was exactly what Cody needed in his first title defense against somebody who is such a veteran that still feels like a viable challenger, even though not necessarily going to threaten the championship. But also at this stage, you're not necessarily threatening the championship either if you're at AJ Styles' point in his career. And most people already know you're not going to have Cody lose it a month from that point. You know, so it makes it hard to have title defenses like this. But at the same time, you've got a crowd that's ready for it and white hot for it. You've got two guys who are capable, who are going to be able to deliver on the in-ring scale. And there's really no losing this situation because you've marketed it so adequately that you've got it in the right place with the right crowd at the right time to where even though everybody knows AJ won't win, it doesn't matter. And that's a really fascinating line to be able to cross in today's professional wrestling, because kayfabe used to be such where you had to kind of snake your way through to make sure people really genuinely thought that next month there was a real viable challenger and that he might lose his title. That's not really the case now. But the fact that you can make it so and arrange it and present it as such to where you can put these people in a position to where they already know the outcome, but they don't care because the ride is so good. It's like, yes, you've ridden the roller coaster before and you know where it ends, but you still enjoy going on the roller coaster. And that's something that's really fascinating about today's WWE. So overall, this show I thought was a very good B show, but it upped itself to an A- show because the crowd was just so damn hot and so damn good. And we need more international shows like this. I've got no problem doing more international shows because the American crowd is just so burnt out. The American crowd was beaten to death by Vince McMahon's booking and of recently Tony Khan's booking. And it's been and TNA's booking. And it's just been beaten to death by just garbage and just horrendous matches and terrible angles. And it's really, WWE did a really good job of nearly killing. There was talk in the territories about killing the town. WWE did a really good attempt of killing the country as far as it really being disinterested in professional wrestling, and they're just starting to rehab that notion. And I think the best way to continue to publicize that image and to rehab the American market is to actually give them less material. And, you know, because you've already got them Raws and SmackDowns, you're already there for a lot of the TV shows, but you're going into different towns you don't normally. I mean, you're going to Cleveland for SummerSlam. You know, they're doing more to be expansive, not only to encompass the world part of their world wrestling entertainment, but also simultaneously recognizing that the WWE American market has been so oversaturated that it needs some recovery time. And that's a good thing. I think that'll also make the major shows feel more major and will give a lot more hot crowds to the television shows, because that's really all the American market is getting in a major state. And all of that is good. All of that is good things. That's smart strategy, and it gives me hope that WWE is really starting to put everything together. They're cooking right now. And this show, for me, as it was with Skylar and as it was with Josh Geddon, gets an 8. It was a good show. Turned into a really good show because of a hot crowd. And it's amazing what a hot crowd can do for a show, especially when you give them stuff to actually enjoy. As novel a concept as that is. But with that being said, I've rambled on long enough. Stay tuned for more Colonial Impact Wrestling content, link in the description. Stay tuned for more Court Martial podcast content coming up. It's going to be more than just these PLEs, not just Paul Levesque ejaculation. We've got a lot more coming up in the archives, especially now that there's a little more liberation on my part. So stay tuned. Thank you very much for coming, and we will see you right after this.